Good afternoon, Mr. Benz. How are you today?
Doing very well.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I represent Leadership Morgan Hill, class of 2010, and there are about 15 of us in the class, and you have been unanimously voted in as one of the major contributors of Morgan Hill, and we'd like to honor you. So we're going to do an interview and find out how you got to where you are, and talk about your major contributions, talk about your love life and how you met your wife, and those kinds of things. So are you ready for the interview?
Ready.
Good. We have a set of questions. Relax. You have water.
Thank you.
Enjoy, and we'll have a fun afternoon.
Thank you.
Okay. State your full name for us, Mr. Benz.
My name is Daniel Max Benz.
Daniel Max Benz. Benz, interesting name. I understand it originates in Austria. Is that correct?
My dad born and raised in Austria until he was 15, and then he made his way to the United States on a ship, earning his own way, and came to St. Louis, Missouri, stayed there for a short time, and then came to San Jose.
When you said he made his way to the United States by ship, earning his way, what do you mean? What did he do?
He didn't have any money to pay for the boarding and eating, and so they allowed him to work his way across. And so he worked on the ship. I don't know what kind of duties they gave him, but he worked on the ship until they landed him here at the United States.
And where did he land, did you say?
That major entry into the United States.
New York, you think? Near Ellis Island?
Ellis.
Probably. Do you have any pictures of any certificates from Ellis Island? No?
I don't believe I do.
Okay, all right. And what about your mother? Where is she from?
She was born in Drummond, South New Zealand. And she came to right to San Jose with her aunt and went to work at a boarding house. And that's where she met my dad.
Your dad was a boarder there?
He came from St. Louis to San Jose to work. He worked in one of the breweries that is now no longer there. But he met her there at the boarding house.
Boarding house. How old was he, did you say? You said he was 15 when?
I would guess about 20. My dad and my mother was probably about 17 or 18.
Okay, good. So and what was her name, her maiden name?
Her maiden name was Ellen Letcher.
Letcher. Okay, good. Okay, so you come from good stock, as they say. High work ethic.
Yes.
Okay, no, we'll definitely go through this and see how that came to, how Morgan Hill benefit from all that. And you were born in San Jose, correct?
Yes, at the San Jose, the only hospital there at that time, I believe, the county hospital. And after I was born, my parents were living in San Martin, so we moved. I came to San Martin.
So you've been here at the age of 2 days or something, right? 2 or 3 days. Okay, good. And you still live in San Martin or in Morgan Hill now?
Morgan Hill.
Morgan Hill, okay. And when did you move to Morgan Hill from San Martin?
We moved several different times. My dad was very proficient at managing the ranches, especially fruit-bearing trees, walnuts, prunes, apricots. And so he would go from one ranch to another and keep his employment going like that. So we did move around a little bit, but it was right here in the this area.
In the valley.
Yes.
So he went from working at a brewery to working in agriculture. Well,
Yes.
I guess a brewery in some ways is related to agriculture. What about your mom? Did she stay at home or did she
She
help?
was a homebody and raised 9 kids.
Oh my.
And
Yeah.
I'm one of four boys, and I had 5 sisters, and was quite a time.
Quite a time.
Yes.
Did you work on your parents' property at all?
Oh yes.
Yeah. What did you do?
Anything that my dad
That told
felt
you to do.
needed to be done.
Give us examples.
Well, he had a ranch and it had fruit trees, so we had to maintain the fruit trees, pruning and trimming and all of those things. And then he went and got into the chicken business at that particular time, which was a big business here in Morgan Hill, big business at that time. And the ranching was a big business at that time, but not anymore.
No, not anymore. No.
So
no.
I was kept very busy.
And did all your siblings work with you?
My siblings?
Yes,
No,
all
I
your
wasn't married at the time.
No, your brothers and sisters. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
yeah.
Yeah.
They were all-
You all helped. And
Yeah.
Did you go to school in Morgan Hill?
I sure did. I
What-
went, first memories that I have was I went to the Grange Hall
Uh-huh.
for I think 1 or 2 semesters, and then went to the Morgan Hill Unified for another short time. Excuse
Some
me.
water? Yeah.
And then went to Machado School, which is my favorite of all of them.
Is that little school that they've
Yes.
moved up there? Yes.
It's out on Oak Glen Avenue,
And that was a grammar school, correct?
grammar school.
So you went there through the
Well,
sixth grade? or
almost the entire
the
schooling.
entire time. Okay.
Yes.
And your siblings as well? You all went there?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, Danny, Cheryl, you went to Morgan Hill, didn't you? But my son went to that school, and what it was is it's a 2-room school. The first room had 1 to 4 grades. The second room had 5 to 8, and 2 teachers. One of the teachers was designated as the principal, and that was the whole staff.
That was it, huh?
No assistants, no aides, nothing. But I believe that I got the best education that you could get. And we had teachers that you'd done your job right there at the school. You did your work right there in the classrooms. And we did have fun times. We had something out there at Machado that we would go and teachers would take us up into the mountains and we'd identify different plants and flowers, and it was a good time.
Oh, how wonderful.
It was
How
a good
beautiful.
time,
Yeah.
and one of the unique things that happened, I went through and graduated, and then my son went to school there, and in the 2nd grade, he got a picture taken, like every one of us did, on the steps of the school. And you'll see that sometime, I'm sure we'll get that. But on the steps of the school, they had the whole 2nd grade with a teacher standing alongside. And there's a picture of my son standing there with a teacher by the name of Miss Ward. Well, we looked through our pictures, and I found another picture of myself in the 2nd grade, sitting on the same steps, the same teacher
With Miss Warden.
with Miss Ward. So it's a very
That's-
unique. So I have those pictures at home on display.
There, and we'd love to see them. I know we will take pictures of those if you allow us to.
But oh,
That
sure.
would be wonderful.
Yes.
So you lived in Morgan Hill. Did you have to walk to school? How did you get to school?
We did for quite a while, and finally, they had one high school bus that ran partly around, and this man would just stop and pick us up.
You just
And,
hail him,
yeah.
and there you go.
It wasn't anything. It was mostly for the high school students, but most of the time we walked.
You walk.
And-
Now, what year are we talking about? What year were you born? I forgot to ask you that. If
Where
you
was
don't-
I born?
What year?
1925.
1925. Okay, so we're talking 1940 now. That 40, 41, you were in high school?
Yeah.
You were during World War II?
Yeah, I left high school in the sophomore year and went into the Navy.
You did? Mm-hmm.
And spent 2.5 years there during the war.
Where were you stationed?
Aboard a ship, an amphibious personnel attack ship. And our job was to pick up troops and all of the troops' equipment, like their jeeps, their tanks, different pieces of equipment, and we'd have them on our ship. And then we would take these troops and load them and haul them and unload them on a beach where they were having a problem or a fight. And it was quite a chore because these troopers, they had all their equipment. They had to carry all their own stuff. And then when they unloaded from our ship, they'd unload into a LCVP, which is a landing craft personnel vehicle. And they'd have to crawl over the side of the ship in just a big rope mesh with all this gear on them. And it was we've seen some of the guys fall into the ship, into the boats, and some of them into the water. But then the task is you have to shove them in and dump them off on the beach.
And then come back and pick them up? Or,
well, no, that wasn't our chore. Our chore was to land
just
them.
To land them.
And with their equipment. So I actually, can I say, enjoyed my time with the Navy. Aboard ship, I enjoyed that. Got into a couple of real bad ones in Okinawa, where I watched them shoot down something like 200 aircraft. And our ship was attacked, and we were saved by one of our destroyer escorts. They escorted us out of the bay, Buccaneer Bay, and on the way out, we had two kamikaze planes come in after us because we were loaded with troops, and they wanted to make a problem there. Well, this destroyer escort started firing on it, and I was standing on the fantail holding a 5-inch 38 projectile because we were all at general quarters. And you could just watch this like you're watching a television movie. And they started shooting at it, and the shots first were way behind, and then up and up, and finally hit the tail of the second ship aircraft, and it exploded and fell right into the water because he was only right over the top of the water. And then he never even hesitated; he just kept shooting and shooting until he was able to hit the other one right in the center and exploded it. And so that saved us from being possibly a victim of those terrible. They were terrible.
So you were on board watching all this?
Oh yeah, I was
the whole time. Now, so let me take you back a little bit to Morgan Hill, and so you're 15, 16. You're drafted into or you?
No, I joined.
You joined, and you were there 2.5 years.
Yeah.
And experiencing all this and helping this country become a better country.
Now, my dad could have got deferments for me, and I talked to him and my mother and told them I didn't want that. So they allowed me to join.
They allowed you to join.
Yeah.
You came back. How old were you when you came back? About 18 or so.
20.
No, because you had to have been 18 to join.
I was in fact, I was still 17, but they allowed me in. And then I spent that 2.5 years, so I was right at 20, 21.
And you came back to Morgan Hill. And then what did you do at that point?
I just started picking up little jobs here and there because there wasn't anything programmed at all for us. And finally decided I'd work with my brother and my dad, and then they were doing little house pads here and there. Excuse me. And I started doing it with this machine, and I'd have to explain the machine was a dog, absolute terrible thing to run. Not only difficult to do what you wanted, but it was physically exhausting. And so I told my dad finally, I says, yeah, we got to do something. I can't, in fact, I won't run this thing anymore.
So let me ask you a question, because I don't
Sure.
know, what's a house pad? What is that?
That's a site that we develop where they build a house.
Oh, like
And because around Morgan Hill, everything's up and down, we either have to cut the side of a hill or
Oh,
whatever the
okay.
plan calls for.
Okay.
But that, you develop your house pad, and then the contractors come in and put the concrete and everything on top of that,
Okay.
and then build a house.
Okay, see, I didn't know that. I
Okay.
didn't, yeah.
So that's what we call it,
That's
a house
a
pad. But
And the machinery you were using, what was that? What did it look
bulldozer,
like?
compactors, water truck, whatever it requires. Because now the county requires you to build a pad exactly to their specifications. And it's becoming so costly that a lot of people will not even apply for a permit. Because my son has gone, I don't know how many times he has, in the last 6 months, submitted proposals, but they're so expensive, and he says, I even hate to send the proposal to him because it's so costly. But now he describes it, and Cheryl works in the office, and so she types these things all up so that the customer knows exactly why they're being charged for so many things, ridiculous things.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Yeah.
that's
Well,
beside
no, we're
the point.
keep that. We're going to get back to that too
Yeah,
when we
okay.
get. So, you're coming back from World War II. Tell me a little bit, and then we'll go into your construction. A little bit of what it was like for a young man to come back to a country that maybe not. Maybe they didn't have the support for a young man to come to. They didn't have the jobs, or what was that like in Morgan Hill?
I think it's a little different because
Yeah.
my dad still was ranching, and I could always fall back into that. On the ship, I was a baker, of all things, and I enjoyed that very much and thought about following that line. And then when they asked me to keep the machines going, why, that changed things. But it wasn't that difficult getting back. It's just that there was nothing. The jobs weren't there because
weren't.
people didn't have money,
Yeah.
and it was strange, but not like it is now.
Yeah, but you had the family support there.
Yes.
Okay, so you came back, you started working with your dad, building pads.
House pads.
Pad, P-A-D-S, huh? I'm learning something
Okay.
here. I had no idea. And back to the machinery, it wasn't working for you. So you talked to your dad and said, I'm not going to do it unless, so continue.
Unless we get a better machine. Well, right after the war, everything had been put into scrap iron, and there were very few machines available. In fact, we couldn't find any, and we finally found one machine that I would describe it as a bare machine. It's a machine that, although it's a track machine, it didn't have a dozer on it, didn't have any hydraulics, and but after I looked at it, all of the components were very good, so we decided to buy it. We picked it up and brought it home, and then my dad called around and made arrangements, and we hauled that machine to Oakland, to the American Tractor and Equipment Company, which I think is still there, and took it into their shop, and they built this bulldozer on this machine. So this machine is one of a kind. There's none other like it. I mean, that's it. And so I operated that machine for probably 5 or 6 years. It was a very good little machine, but it was small. And from there, I started getting a larger machine, and so I sold this machine.
How much did you pay for it initially? Do you remember? Or how much did your dad pay?
I think it was something like $1,400 for the bare machine.
That's a lot, yeah.
Well, that's pretty cheap, really.
Yeah. Oh,
But
then, no.
then we
Yeah.
had to have the dozer put on it and so forth. And then I finally sold it and bought a little larger machine and forgot about this machine. And then here, I'll jump forward quite a ways.
It's okay.
About 4 years ago, I seen this thing sitting up on the side of a hill, and I said, that looks kind of familiar to that bulldozer that's
Here
laying there
in
alongside.
in Morgan Hill.
In Morgan Hill, less than a mile from where I live. And so I researched it enough and found out that was my old machine, but it was nothing but a big pile of junk. Just, I mean, pieces. And I tried to buy it from this fella, and that's a story I probably shouldn't even get into because it's not
Not
good.
pretty, huh?
But he wouldn't sell me the machine. He wouldn't sell it. And it's just a piece of junk. And I had a neighbor who has more nerve than anybody that I ever knew. And I asked her, I said, could you go up there and see if you could buy that old machine just for
Sentimental reason, right?
for whatever?
Yeah.
And she did, and she was able to buy it. Well, when this guy seen me and my son go up there to pick it up, he was a little bit upset because he didn't want us to have it for whatever reason.
For whatever, yeah.
So anyhow, I brought that thing home on the truck, piece after piece, and put it in the yard. And for the last 4 years, I've been collecting parts and things and putting this machine back together to the point where we're at right now. I have ended up with 3 of these old machines just to find enough parts because it's a 1938 International Harvester. And finally found enough parts, and we got this thing all put back together, and right now all it's going to have is one more coat of paint, and then I have all of the decals. Cheryl searched all over the United States to find decals for it, things like that. So this machine will be a piece of nostalgia that will be just parked in our yard.
You won't
It will
operate
run and
it,
everything.
but you won't
The
do it.
hydraulics work, everything works on it, but it's
But it's symbolic. It's your
Just-
life, isn't it?
exactly.
It's symbolic of how beautiful.
Yeah.
And you leave it for your family, your grandchildren.
exactly.
How wonderful. Well, I want to come back to that.
Sure,
Let's
okay.
go now it's fine. We can go back and forth. Right? Life is not that simple. Memories come up.
Right.
You're back in Morgan Hill. You actually start the construction business through your
Yeah.
father, right? At what point does Mrs. Benz come into the picture?
I would say 49.
So 4 or
That'd
5
be-
years after
Yeah.
you're back. Okay, and you're at church.
Yes.
You're a regular member of
Yes.
this particular church. And when did you see her, or how did you see her, or tell us
Well,
the
they
circumstances?
had a pretty good group of young people, and I got interested. She was a very attractive young lady,
Still is.
and still is.
Still is.
And I got together with her. I don't know how she ever agreed to go out with me, but she did, and we became first good friends, and then it became more of a romance, and so in 1950 we got married.
And how many children do you have?
I have 3. One of them is sitting here, Cheryl, and I have my other daughter, Karen, who is a escrow officer in the title company, and my son, Danny, who, thank God, about 6 years ago, well, prior to that now, we talked, my wife and I talked together, and I said, we're not going to push Danny into anything. I want him to pick his own vocation, whatever it is, and I'll allow that as far as I'm concerned. But after a few years, he finally came to us and he says, I think I'm going to stay with this kind of work.
With your business, yeah.
And you can't imagine how quick I reached into my pockets and pulled out all of the keys. And I set them out there and I said, the whole ball of wax is yours.
Oh, you're proud.
Oh,
You're
I am.
very proud of that. You're very proud.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And the best part of it is I didn't dump a big debt on him at the same time. So he was able to pick up and run with it from there. And I feel like I am just blessed. Our family is just blessed because of that decision. So
You are.
things are going very well, and he's doing a fantastic job. He'll probably do a lot better job than I ever did,
Oh.
because things are getting more
Things are
technical all the
different.
time.
Things are different. Now,
Yeah.
did your children get to know your parents, the grandparents?
Oh, sure.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Did you visit Austria and...
No.
No? Did you?
Well, not with them, but we did. In fact, we went to the very city where my dad was born, Graz, and we enjoyed that city very much. Graz was very interesting.
What did you learn about yourself from there, like where you come from? Did anything come up?
No.
No?
It's just we were on a cruise, so we
Uh-huh.
didn't have
Oh,
an
you have
awful
much
lot of
time.
time, you know. But we really enjoyed the city of Graz. And one of the things, we were walking some of the cobblestone streets, or some of them real narrow, and all of a sudden you couldn't help but be overwhelmed with the aroma of a bake shop.
Oh.
Oh my goodness. And we walked a block or so and found it and went into that thing, and it just would blow your mind.
Back to your baking days, huh?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It was just
Yeah.
fabulous. So we really enjoyed our trip
Do
there.
you bake now?
No, I don't.
No. Okay, so back to construction.
Okay.
So here we are in Morgan Hill, and I understand you've had a lot to do with the growth of this, or the building of this community. Tell us about that. What kind of work have you done, and who were you involved with, and what do you take pride in?
Not having any complaints. You know, that's.
No lawsuits, no complaints.
But it started out, I did a lot of the clearing work up at Holiday Lake before that development even started. I would clear out for the streets and clear out for a house pad, just brushing it and getting trees out of the way. And then we built, I don't know how many of the house pads that are up there. We done all of that and paved the driveways and and then we went from Holiday Lake right next door to Jackson Oaks. Did the same thing there. Did a lot of the preliminary work. And most of the house pads, I can't even remember how many, just one after another.
That you did.
We had several contractors that we worked for that just kept us completely busy, building pads for these houses and driveways and paving the driveways.
So when did all that start, Mr. Benz, the clearing of Holiday Lakes and all? How long ago was that? Roughly.
I would say it had to be right after the 50s.
The 50s, and you were involved at the very beginning.
Yeah.
And how big was your company? How many of you?
Just three of us.
you.
Just
you
three of us.
and a couple of workers? Yeah.
My dad would do what he could, but he wasn't into the operating of the machines. He would kind of make some contacts. And then my brother and myself and maybe an employee or so. But when you're developing house pads, you don't just go in and rush things, because the house pad that you get now, there's maybe 3 or 4 different elevations, and they have to be done in tolerances that you're talking about 1/10 of an inch, so that the concrete people don't have to spend a lot of extra money and fill a place up where you don't have it graded properly. So we were really kept busy.
And were you involved with the city council or any other organization as part of your work in contracting? Or
We did some. I don't know if anybody here would remember Oscar Beckenhauer. He was the city superintendent early on, and we did a number of jobs for the city during his tenure at the city hall. And then they got involved with the what you call it, the politics of being a city.
Of growth.
And so they would say, well, you have to have a license to do this, you have to have a license to do that. I had a business license, and but it got to the point where you couldn't hardly do anything because they said, well, how much you paying your men? I tell them. They said, well, we got a prevailing wage. And I said, we're paying more than the prevailing wage. But he said, oh, you're not union. I said, no, I'm not. And I said, I can't be, because if I was a union, that man there, he couldn't pick up a shovel, or he couldn't push a wheelbarrow, because that's another
classification.
Another classification. Anyway, we worked without the union representation, and we still do, because it works for us very well. And now they understand that, and we're not bothered at all.
But things have changed.
Yeah.
Things have changed. What was it like for you growing up? And I'm going to take you back again as a young man. What did you do for entertainment? What was it like growing up here?
What it was like was, you mean prior to going into the service?
Yes, as a young man.
Like I said, my dad had the orchards, and then he built all these chicken houses, and so I wasn't even able to get into sports at high school, because as soon as the school was over, I was transported home to work. And that's the way we were. And I'm not complaining, because it didn't hurt me at all, except I would have enjoyed playing some of the sports. But it worked for Dad and Mom and the rest of the family, so that's the way it was. And so we would enjoy just doing regular things that a person like myself would.
But you were outside a lot. You were active.
Yeah.
What sports would you have played?
I would have loved football and baseball.
Did you get a chance at all later on in life? No.
Just not professionally, or out of school. I played softball here at Morgan Hill in different teams, and enjoyed that very much. But
now let's push forward again to development. So Jackson Oaks, Holiday Estates, where else have you done work?
Well, Woodland Acres, almost any place around here.
Now where's that, Woodland Acres?
That's off of Yaugus Avenue.
Oh, down that way. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were involved in
And
there.
all over, almost any place around here.
So you literally built Morgan Hill.
A lot of those.
Did you get involved in the, for lack of a better word, the politics of growth containment or any of that?
No.
No. You were just.
I was just.
You want a job done? I'll come do it for you. If you don't want it done, I won't do it for you.
We did one job of particular interest on West San Martin Avenue. People came to us with a set of plans that you wouldn't believe. 20,000 square feet house, and hired us to do the work. And we went in there, and first thing I had to do was level the ground, make the pad. That took me well over 2 weeks just to level the pad enough so that they could go out there and make all their lines and show where they're going to build a house. Then after that was done, they showed us they were going to build a basement. This thing was huge, 11 feet deep. So when we had it nice and level like this, then they come out and said, now this is the basement. And we had to dig that basement. It was all shaly rock. But anyway, this development on this parcel, we worked for 4 years, and actually it's not finished yet. The driveway hasn't been paved, and the yard hasn't been paved, but it was a phenomenal job. We put in what they call it's a heating system, where the contractor came in and drilled, I think, 200 holes in the property right out in the front, 200 feet deep, about 12 inches diameter, and then they put pipes down in each one of them. It's for thermal control.
Yeah, yeah.
And then we had to tie all of these lines together and take them to where they went under the house into the systems. So it's thermal cooling. And it was a phenomenal job. Just everything was different. And so we enjoyed that. It was quite a chore and a challenge, but my son is very adept and very sharp, and we had no problems at all. In fact, he was able to help the owner and the developer make some major changes that would make it so much easier for them and for us to do it, make it cheaper for them. But anyway, we enjoyed that, but it was quite a chore.
It was quite. Now, did your father teach you all of this, or did you learn as you went? How did you learn the trade? Tell us about that.
By doing it.
By doing it.
Yeah.
Did you take classes?
Well, when I was in the Navy, I served on the ship, like I explained. But when I got out, I got a letter from the Navy asking me to look at the construction battalion, Seabees. And so I did, and I got into instead of being a fleet reservist, I was a construction battalion reservist. And I would be required to go 2 weeks a year to a class. And all during the year, every 2 weeks, I'd go to the meetings, and they had a fantastic program where you learn machines. And they had all of the best stuff you can. And so I learned a lot from them and got to the point where I became the senior officer for the transportation and equipment division. And it was my responsibility to train the guys as they came in.
Okay.
So I learned a lot through that program, and hopefully I was able to add to their program.
Sounds like you did.
Yeah.
That you did. Good. In all the years you've been in Morgan Hill, what are you mentioned some of this already, but you might want to add, what are some of the most significant changes you've seen, aside from the growth?
Oh.
There's so many,
growth.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
The growth, yeah. What else have you seen change? Good and positive or negative?
It was, we live on Edmondson Avenue, and when we first moved into that area, any car that went down Edmondson Avenue, you'd wave to them because you knew them. My goodness, now it's a boulevard. It's actually a boulevard. But those kind of changes kind of sneak up on you. They're very insidious. And but I've always enjoyed this area, and we've been blessed by having the opportunity to make a number of cruises over the different countries. There is none better than right here, right Santa Clara County.
Yeah.
The closest thing that comes to this is New Zealand, South Island, which is a beautiful, and very similar to this, except that it's opposite. But you're going to go a long way before you can ever find anything better than right here in Santa Clara County.
A lot of pride I hear in your voice
yes.
about being from here and being part of this. Very nice. That's a wonderful quote. That's a beautiful quote you just said. I appreciate that. What are some of your disappointments about Morgan Hill? Anything that you wish would be differently, aside from not being able to know every single person that lives here anymore?
Yeah.
Anything else that you wish?
I don't even watch the programs that they put on, but I do not like the politics that I see going on here in Morgan Hill. And it's everywhere, I guess, but it bothers you when it's your home.
Your home, yeah.
And so...
What are some of the, if you feel comfortable, and if you don't, give me an example.
Well, there are many things that our company could save the city of Morgan Hill and different people lots of money with the things that I see being wasted, just wasted and overdone, overbuilt, and sometimes shabbily built. and it kind of gets you, you know.
Because you know the business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've been able to
Yeah.
do a few jobs. We did the paving, the new paving at that old police station. They allowed us to come in and do that because they couldn't get anybody else to do it. And several of them, several of the buildings here in Morgan Hill, we've done pad work and paving and all over. Just, but the politics, I think, is it just kind of grit your teeth. So, and it's probably better here than many places, but
you've seen the change.
yes, I sure have.
You've seen the change.
Yeah,
Do you love your profession?
I enjoy it.
You enjoy it?
In fact, we have some machines that Danny has in the yard that I still just can't hardly wait to get on them. Well, they've developed this thing called hydrostatic, which is instead of gears and shifters and everything, it's all done by hydraulics. And so we have a couple of those machines, and you sit on the machine, and it's a comfortable seat, big armrests, and right here is one lever, one here like this. If you want to go forward, you tilt it that way, go back. So you're just playing a game almost.
A computer game.
It's just like a toy.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to operate that you enjoy it, and it's not physical, because I have my physical limitations now, and I can't. For instance, I can't stay out in the heat too long.
Yeah, no, we make sure of that.
And my energy is down because I'm going through some testing and treatments, and it kind of keeps you wore down a little bit. But I thank God that I'm as able as I am.
You are. Your memory is wonderful. Besides, or in addition to your wife and your family, what else do you love? What do you love the most about Morgan Hill?
Being able to go, being able to go to Walmart or to Johnson Lumber and get what you want. Like previous years earlier on, you'd have to go to San Jose to get anything. And so the development of this type of thing has been very good.
The convenience. Okay.
And we're living on a street on Edmondson where the first house I built, my daughter now lives in, and I built the one right next to it with a Calvet loan. But now we're surrounded on the west side by 5 houses. The cheapest one is $2.something million. And then if you go across Edmondson on the north side, there's 5 more over there that are probably more expensive than that. So we're surrounded by huge
multi-million-dollar
Oh,
homes.
yeah.
Yeah.
And here we have a 1,800 square foot house that we are very comfortable in.
It's beautiful. I've been to your house. Yeah.
And Cheryl is enjoying the nice oak tree in front of her house. But my son has got a property up above the hill behind where our equipment is parked. And I wish he could start a house, but with the way things are right now, he's just holding back. And he's just recently married, has 3 beautiful kids, just we enjoy so much. But that kind of stuff where you're held back because of restrictions. And
the tough times that we're in right
before he ever would put a stick of wood on that lot, he would be paying close to $500,000 for development work, septic tanks and testing and driveway built to a specification that's a street, you know, and just so many things that kind of bothers you. That's the politics that I was talking about. It's just, there's no reason for it.
And I don't. You're not alone, by the way.
Yeah,
in
I'm
this.
sure.
You're
I'm
definitely
sure.
not alone. It's come up in our leadership team. Have you been vocal about this at city council meetings? Or
No.
No. Yeah, you are today.
I'm not politics.
You are today, but I will trust me on this, that there are many people that would support you.
I'm
in
sure
this.
there would be.
Yeah, of all ages.
Because these guys that Danny's just started working on these proposals, they're flabbergasted when Danny shows them, this is what we have to do on this property before you'll get a permit.
You have no choice.
And it's very difficult
very,
for us to do that, because you almost turn it away, and then they'll go and buy or hire a guy that's not even a contractor and come in with a piece of inferior equipment or so forth and just make a mess and then leave the guy, and that's happened. We have to go back and take care of it. But it's because of the regulations that they have imposed on every homeowner, and it's kind of tough.
And you have
But
a skill.
I still love this area.
You love the area. So in addition to, you had quite an involvement in World War II. I mean, you were a major part of that. What about, did you see any changes after the Vietnam War or during the Civil Rights Movement in Morgan Hill? How was the city affected?
I don't think Morgan Hill is affected very much that way.
It was too small, maybe,
Yeah.
at that point.
There are those that are affected, but it doesn't become a huge issue, and that's good.
That's good. So it was too small. Tell us, if you can, one of your favorite stories about being in Morgan Hill, or about the city itself, or a funny story. What would you? Oh, you've got one. Okay. Couldn't wait to.
When I was, I would say 16, 15, 16, 17. Back then, you know what an outhouse is. Okay, well, they had them quite a few of them around this area. And these three friends of mine, we decided on a Halloween that we were going to create a little scene. And so we picked up a couple of these outhouses, which you could do.
You mean literally pick them up?
Yeah, picked them up and hauled them in here and put them right in the center of the street in Morgan Hill. And we were having a ball, just enjoying it. Until a police officer, who was actually a sheriff, his name was Steele. He was the sheriff, and he caught us. And the worst thing you ever wanted to have happen during that time of our life was for your parents to find out about it. You didn't care about the police knowing about it, because, they'd reprimand you or whatever. But if your parents knew about it, then you were really in serious trouble. So he got us all in his car, and he was telling us, he says, I'm going to have to talk to your parents about this. And oh my goodness.
Would you say, take me to jail? Who cares?
We prevailed on him a little bit. And anyway, he took us in his car, and he drove back into Morgan Hill. And you know where Ragu's restaurant is?
No.
Okay, that used to be called Skeel's Hotel and Restaurant. His dad and mom owned it, and they ran it. Well, he took us in there and sat us down, and he had his, I guess his mother, cooked us all breakfast. The whole bunch of us, all four of us. And he sat there and talked to us all the time we were eating. And he said, if you guys will put everything back exactly like it was, and you don't have any complaints, I won't tell your parents. So, oh my goodness, what a relief.
It's the best
So anyway,
story.
we did that, but that's what happened during he was the only officer we had here, was Lloyd Skeels.
Yes.
And
your mom and dad never found out?
well,
Later.
They later.
Later.
But But that was the kind of way things
Yeah,
went,
yeah,
you know.
Yeah. What would have happened if they'd found out?
Oh my goodness.
Hate to think.
Oh. If I thought I had work to do after school,
School,
I would
that'd
have to work to do all night. But no, my dad was very strict
Yeah.
disciplinarian.
Yeah.
And I'm not complaining about that because most of the time we needed it, you know.
Yeah. But what a beautiful story. The policeman took care of you, taught you a lesson, but protected you as well.
Yeah.
That's a great story. I love that.
The only police officer
Yeah.
that I remember was Leo Tanashi. He was a patrol officer, and that was just about the time that he put the first stop sign at Main and First. Up until then, there was no controls, and all of the traffic from San Francisco and Los Angeles went through Morgan Hill.
Yes, I remember that.
There was no other way
Yeah,
to go.
Yeah.
You went right through the middle of Morgan
Yeah.
Hill, 2 lanes.
2 lanes. That I remember that. Yes.
And then
yeah.
a short time after that, they proposed putting in another lane. And the church that we were going to, which is on Monterey Highway up near Wright, and it was encumbering their progress. So they had to move our church back 50 feet to give them another lane of traffic. And I can remember that. And then it went from 3 lanes. If you remember going from San Jose to Morgan Hill, 3 lanes, which was a terrible thing because it was they call it a suicide lane. And there was no freeway or nothing, but all of that traffic, you know. So I've seen all of this happen, and it's been quite an experience.
Blood Alley, they called it too, didn't they?
Pardon?
Didn't they call it Blood Alley as
Yes.
well? Something like that?
And
Yeah.
this officer Tanashi, he was very aggressive in his watching because all of the traffic, and it became known all over the country, all over the United States maybe. If you go through Morgan Hill, slow down or you're going to get a ticket. And everybody knew that, and everybody would tell you about that. So those kind of things.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, our previous honoree, Mr. Wenderson, he's a couple years older than you are. Did you meet him as a young man? Do you remember him at all?
I remember him.
Kid?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
he went to the same school as you did.
yeah.
Yeah.
And he, the reason I remember him so well is because Roger Knopf took on the development work on his ranch
Yes.
on Yagas.
Yes, he shared
Well,
that.
we did all of the work for Roger. And he was involved in all of
Yes,
that, and
yes.
we developed his site where he was going to build a house. I don't think he ever built a house up there.
I don't
He built one, I think, then he sold it.
Yes. I
But
believe so.
yeah,
Yeah.
I got
okay.
to know Ed pretty well.
Yeah, good. At this time, I'm going to open it up to our audience for if there are any questions or comments that people want to make, and we may have to repeat their
Sure.
questions, but anything you'd like him to share, anything else you'd like him to know, Linda?
So, at the time we were gone, World War II, and so the Japanese contingent that was in Morgan Hill. So, did you see any changes going on when you came back with those folks that were, part
Well,
of this community, and when
let-
they came back?
Let me repeat the question because she doesn't have a mic.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, during World War II and the Japanese community that was probably interned at some point, when you came back, did you see changes in the population or what was going on with the Japanese farming community?
Well, when I was going in to Machado School, there was a number of Japanese families that went to that school, and I knew them, personally. And when I came back, I located some of them that had moved to different properties, and so I knew all of them. But it was really unique, I think, the fact that I did not ever hear any of them screaming and complaining about anything.
No, they don't.
You know,
Yeah.
that was a bad a bad deal for them. I think it was, at the time, I think it was necessary for that to happen, but it's so unique because now you just say one word and you got the whole country jumping on you. These people didn't, you know, they had a hard time. They had a hard time of it. And they're not the complaining type, and so I'm so thankful for that.
Did you have close friends, and then when you came back, they were no longer here? Is that what you?
Well, they weren't on the same ranches.
They weren't. They had been moved by the government, and were you able to track them down?
Yeah,
again?
there's still some of them live here.
Yeah. Did you know the Kinoshitas?
The Yonedas.
Yonedas, okay.
Mainly. Was quite a large family, and but anyway, it was a different environment for them, and I think a different mindset, if you want to put it like that. That they didn't scream and holler and demand all these things that are demanded now of the United States. So.
But you saw that. You saw that change.
Yes.
Yeah. Any other comments, questions before we close?
During the Navy, when you went into the Navy, what was your rank, just for our records? And when you got out of Navy, what was your rank?
What was your rank in the Navy at the beginning?
When I got out of the service, I was they call it RN2. And I went into the CB program afterwards, like I described, and took all the correspondence courses and went all through it. And I went all the way up to Chief Petty Officer. And then from there, I had the opportunity to try for warrant. So I went to warrant, and I went from 1, and I put in the necessary 2 years, I think, or 3 years. Then I went to 2, and I did the same thing again, took all exams and the correspondence courses. Went to 3, and when I got to 3, it was about another 2 years, and I got made the 4th. And the 4th one is your fully commissioned officer. And the unique thing is, when I was going for 3, I took the exam and I passed it, but there was a guy in Maine, I think, but he only had 2 openings. And this guy in Maine beat me on the test by a couple of points, and so he was awarded it. And I said, "Oh, brother," So anyway, went on, and then I came due again, and I took the exam again. And before I was awarded the W4 commission, this guy that beat me in Maine came down and joined our division in San Jose. And we became the best of friends. And I finally made W4, and they wanted me to stay in after I was getting a little weary of going up there every 2 weeks and all that. And I said, "I don't know." I said, "Well, if you stay in, we'll make you a lieutenant commander," and which would have been a little increase in pay. But I decided, no, I'm going to stay home for a while. So I got out as a W4 warrant with a pretty decent little retirement, and so I'm thankful for that. And but the CB program, excellent.
What's it called?
Excellent.
CB?
The
CB?
Construction Battalion, CB.
Thank you.
They write it out SEABEES.
Okay.
CBs.
Construction Battalion.
Yeah.
I might need help from your daughter in getting all this written out. Okay. Mr. Benz, in addition to everything you've shared with us, and again, the fact that you literally built Morgan Hill, what would you consider your family, in addition to all of that, what do you consider your most important contribution, your family's contribution to this area? What would you say?
Well, developing a business and being here consistently since the 46 area, all the way. We've been in business all the time. And I think that we have an excellent reputation because we get all kinds of referrals, and we're blessed by that.
Sounds like you have a trustworthy business, one that people
I
can
believe so.
dependable.
I believe so.
They're very unique.
One of the things that my son has done, and he has really worked at it, is to develop a real close relationship with all of the inspectors that he has to work with. And they know him now. They know he's not going to skip this to do that. Yeah, they know that. And they have told him they have a lot of respect for him, and so he has for them too.
That he learned from his dad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would categorize your as a business of integrity, honesty,
Yep.
right, and quality.
Absolutely.
That's how I would.
Quality.
That's what I hear in your voice.
We do developments that are very, very difficult
So yeah.
because he can. And some of the house sites that he has to develop are so strange that each one of them is a unique experience. So he looks forward to whenever a guy will come to him and he'll say, well, can you give me a set of at least your preliminary plans so that I can look at it? And then he'll look at it and he'll say, okay, I can give you an idea, but I can't give you a price until you give me the approved plan with the signature on it. Because the county comes back right at you if you're not an approved plan.
Yeah.
But anyway, he's very unique in doing that, and so they have really developed a rapport here in the area.
So that's okay. Good. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
It's really interesting. When he was in the Navy, he was in the harbor when they signed the armistice for
Oh,
the war.
yes.
And it was really a unique
Oh,
experience.
tell us.
Okay.
Tell us about that. Yes. Thank you.
Dolores, can you repeat the question? Just so you-
So, well, why don't I ask it in another way? You were a key participant in World War II,
Yes.
and you shared a lot of stories with us about that. What else would you like to share with?
I had a unique experience of sailing into Tokyo Bay on a ship. We were loaded with troops, and behind me were 4 other ships exactly like ours, loaded with troops, and the armistice hadn't been signed yet. And it's a unique experience because where we were sailing, we were like going through a big, huge canal. And I'll always remember, never forget, and envision it all the time. I look back at those 4 ships behind us, and where we got those flags, I don't know. I've never seen them before. On all of these 4 ships, they had American flags on it where they were so big that even from the mast, from the top of the mast, the flag would almost touch the deck of the ship. So when we were sailing in, you'd look back and you'd see these flags going like this.
I can
And
see
it's,
it. I can see it. It's just
almost bring
Yeah.
a tear to your eye.
Oh.
And so as we were coming in, we were all at general quarters because you could look up on the side, you could see big guns, you know, and it was kind of a real experience. And then we began to notice a sound that you couldn't identify. And it just kept up and kept up, and finally it got so loud that we were looking around, and finally one of the guys with the binoculars said, "Look at the aircraft that's coming." And so right over the top of us, we seen more aircraft than I ever imagined were in the whole world. Bombers and fighters. all kinds of aircraft, and they came right in over the top of us, just real low, just a huge rumble. And I'll tell you, when we seen that, I said, how could any country ever think they could defeat this United States of America? I never in my life seen so many aircraft. And they flew and flew and flew from big, wide area. Just amazing demonstration of power. And so that kind of let the old air out, you know.
The pride, you can see it in your face
And
now,
it was really a unique experience. And then after we got into the harbor there, and we dropped anchor prior to unloading, and we were about a quarter of a mile from the Missouri. And I went and got a pair of binoculars from one of the officers there, and I could look right over there, and I watched them go up on the Missouri to sign the peace treaty. So I seen that happen. And that was a unique experience.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh my! How far were you? From
About a quarter of a mile.
You said that. Wow.
Not too far. So that was
What
unique.
did you feel? What did you feel at the time?
Oh my goodness!
I'm sure you remember the feelings.
When those people over there seen that demonstration of power, my goodness. Here was a couple of battleships there, and then this show of aircraft. Oh my goodness! It just took all of the doubt out.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So,
you realized it was worth it. I'm putting words in your mouth.
no,
but
it's really.
Yeah. Very nice. Very
After we unloaded the troops, I snuck on one of our landing craft and went in on the beach. And this was Hiroshima. And went into the dock to pick up mail. And you've probably seen pictures, but I seen it with my own eyes, the devastation of those small bombs. There was nothing left that I could see out there, except if it had huge concrete, you might see one pillar sticking up, but everything else was flat. I mean, just absolutely flat. And as I walked down this one walk to go to pick up our mail, you would see occasionally, you'd see a person walking down the street. And as soon as you got close to them, they would turn and put their face right up against the wall and sit there like that. They're scared to death. Scared to death. You know, and so I've had a few experiences that make you really proud to be an American, for one thing, and thankful to God for my safety. And so I am a blessed person.
You are. And you also saw the human impact of that, which was not good, sad.
No.
Yeah, and you're okay, huh?
Oh yeah, I'm
you're
fine.
Okay. You're okay. Before we close, I want to acknowledge that Mrs. Benz is sitting here, and tell us a little bit about the impact that she's had in your life and the role that she has played in your life.
Oh my goodness.
And that would take us 3 hours, I know,
I
but
know,
just
but
please.
I'll try to make it short, but we got married, and we've always, everybody has had a little up and down here and there. And that's because of my work. She never knew when I was coming home to have lunch. She never knew, you know, I'd be out. Sometimes I worked Saturdays and Sundays. It was tough then. In fact, I took a second job after I first started working in our own business. I took a second job, and I drove the school bus for the Live Oak High School.
Oh my.
For how many, 2.5 years, 3 years?
Wow.
Just to supplement my income. And, but she could never really count on me being there at 4:30 like a lot of people do, you know, or 5 o'clock. But she stuck with me with all of this baloney, you know. And I have been so blessed. And then she has given us the 3 of the most great kids in the world. I just can't explain enough.
I would like you to come up here, Mrs. Benson. Why don't you? Yeah. Why don't you sit down here?
Sit here?
Yes. Just, and I'm going to stay next to you so that the mic is here.
Okay.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Continue.
What can you say?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. You can just talk next to me because the mic is here.
Okay.
So, go ahead, Mr. Benz. You were talking.
Oh, this went on, and like we have these 3 children, but during that period,
You're fine.
she did all of the book work for our business, which was pretty, not too many people, just, but it was still all the reports, all of the paychecks, all of the reporting, and she did all that, raised our children, took care of our house, just.
And look at
I
her.
can't.
She's gorgeous.
She is.
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Benz, Mrs. Benz, thank you very much for joining us. It's been my honor and the audience's honor, and Leadership Morgan Hill, thank you. And we look forward to seeing you at the Board of Supervisors, at the event, your family, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you.
It's
We
been
appreciate-
interesting for me because I've never got involved in anything
Yeah.
really, and I'm not saying this is political at all, but I'm almost grateful that I've been asked to say a few things. And
Thank you. There are many, many people who wanted to hear from you. So
Oh,
your
that's good.
people know, and not just the group, but your peers who acknowledge your contribution.
Thank you.
So we appreciate that very much. Thank
Something
you.
else that he didn't mention.
Yes.
When he was in the middle of all this, he would be called out to fight fire.
Oh, volunteer firefighter? Yeah.
We'll take our
Forestry
machines.
would take- and he could work in the hills. A lot
yes,
of them can't
yes,
do that.
yes.
We've been up in Mount Umadum, did that fought
yes,
fire up there
yes.
in Los Gatos.
Yes.
Anybody know of Yehudi Menuhin, the violinist that lived in Los Gatos?
Yeah.
We had to protect his property, and my son went down there one day.
Brother.
My brother,
Uh-huh.
John, who just passed away a couple of years ago. But the fire marshal that was with him had a radio and said, you got to go down here and brush out around that house. John said, and he's not scared of anything. Fantastic. He has a reputation that won't quit. But he told the guy, he said, with all the rocks and everything in this stuff, he said, this is pretty dangerous. And the guy says, I've got a thing on this radio that says you got to go down there. I said, okay. So he started down, and he got on some of them boulders, and I mean, we're not like this, like that, running on top of with a machine, a crawler machine. And he is an expert above, I've never seen anybody like him. But he controlled the machine enough so he didn't lose it this way. And he just went sliding down this mountain, and he got there and he couldn't control it away from an oak tree. And he went down, and the dozer went into the stump, and it threw the tractor up in the air like that. And he was belted in, but it threw his hat off, and it fell down behind him, and it went underneath the tractor. Well, here is the guy up there with the radio watching all of this, and he thought he was under the machine. And so they finally got down to him, and he was okay, a little sore, but it tore up our tractor. And the reason I don't do that anymore is because forestry would not pay for the damage on our tractor. It broke the exhaust system, and just anyway.
Yeah.
But a unique little excerpt on this thing My mother at that particular time had suffered a stroke, and she was in a rooming house, rest home in Los Gatos. And that night, I went to visit her. We did. And she says, "How's John?" And I says, he's fine. She said, "You know, I just had a dream earlier today." And she said, "I dreamt I seen John hanging in a oak tree." And she said, "I started praying for him." So, you know, this type of a thing just, so we have a faith that we really rely on. And we're so thankful for that.
There's some other energy out there, right?
Yeah,
That's,
you bet.
okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, dear.
Okay.
Appreciate
for
all your
joining us.
efforts
Yeah.
and
Beautiful woman.
Very nice.
Yeah.
thank you.
And this is just the beginning of the party.